The novel opens in Umuofia with the public reputation of Okonkwo firmly established. His fame rests primarily upon his youthful victory over Amelins the cat, a wrestler unbeaten for 7 years. That triumph becomes the symbolic beginning of his ascent. In a society that prizes strength, endurance, and achievement, Okonkwo embodies masculine success. Yet his identity is shaped as much by repudiation as by ambition. His father, Anoka, had been gentle, artistic, and improvident, a debtor who loved music more than labor. To Okonkwo, this legacy represents shame. His entire life becomes a determined effort to distance himself from that memory. Achebe situates Okonkwo within the complex social fabric of Igbo life, a world governed by ancestral reverence, ritual observance, communal deliberation, and proverbs that crystallize collective wisdom. Okonkwo has earned titles, cultivated large yam fields, and built a household of 3 wives and many children. Yams, the king of crops, symbolize virility and prosperity. His barns testify to discipline and Torah. Yet the chapter subtly foreshadows tragedy. Okonkwo's virtues are inseparable from severity. His fear of weakness governs his temperament, producing impatience and quick anger. He demands strength not only of himself but of everyone around him. The narrative thus introduces both the grandeur and the brittleness of his character. He stands at once as the product of his culture and as an exaggerated embodiment of its sternest values. From the outset, Achebe frames a tension between communal balance and individual excess, a tension that will deepen as the story unfolds. Chapter 2. Trouble stirs when Umuofia learns that a woman from the village has been murdered in Mabeno. The elders consult the Oracle of the Hills and the Caves, whose verdict demands reparation rather than immediate warfare. Okonkwo is chosen as emissary to Mabeno, a sign of his prestige and reliability. His mission underscores the political sophistication of Igbo society, where justice is mediated through negotiation and ritual authority. Mabeno yields to Umuofia's demand, offering a virgin and a young boy, Ikemefuna. The boy is placed in Okonkwo's household. His arrival introduces a quiet yet profound shift in domestic life. Though initially fearful and confused, Ikemefuna gradually adapts. He forms a close bond with Moi, Okonkwo's eldest son, who admires his stories of bravery and adventure. Achebe presents this exchange not as barbaric arbitrariness, but as part of a structured communal ethic. Restitution replaces bloodshed. The episode enlarges the moral landscape of the novel, demonstrating that Igbo society possesses institutions of governance, diplomacy, and spiritual consultation. For Okonkwo, however, Ikemefuna's presence is fraught with ambivalence. He recognizes the boy's usefulness and potential but refuses emotional attachment, fearing it may suggest weakness. The seeds of later tragedy are quietly sown. The chapter widens the scope of the narrative from personal ambition to inter-village relations, illustrating how communal stability depends upon ritualized justice. Beneath the surface order, however, there lingers the uncertainty of Ikemefuna's fate. Chapter 3. Achebe turns to Okonkwo's early struggles, illuminating the hardship behind his present status. Unlike his father, who left nothing but debt, Okonkwo begins life with neither inheritance nor support. He approaches Mwakabi, a wealthy elder, to request yam seeds. The scene reveals the cultural importance of patronage and respect for each. Impressed by Okonkwo's diligence, Mwakabi grants him the seeds. The farming season that follows proves disastrous. Drought withers the crops, relentless rain then destroys what survives. This year becomes remembered as the year of the drought. Okonkwo's harvest fails, yet he does not succumb to despair. Where Anoka might have yielded, Okonkwo perseveres. His resilience becomes the foundation of his later prosperity. Through agricultural detail, Achebe conveys the intimate relationship between the people and the land. Yam cultivation is not merely economic but symbolic. It defines masculinity, discipline, and endurance. Success depends upon cooperation between human labor and natural cycles. The chapter sharpens the contrast between father and son. Anoka's improvidence stands against Okonkwo's relentless industry. Yet this contrast also reveals the rigidity of Okonkwo's self-conception. His fear of resembling his father hardens into a lifelong obsession. Thus, Chapter 3 deepens our understanding of Okonkwo's psychology. His success is not accidental but forged through adversity. However, the very intensity of his determination suggests an imbalance, an excessive will that tolerates no vulnerability. The narrative continues to weave admiration with quiet forewarning. Chapter 4. The sacred week of peace precedes planting season, a time during which violence is forbidden in honor of the earth goddess. Yet Okonkwo, angered by his wife Ojugo's negligence in preparing a meal, beats her severely. His action violates communal law. The priest of the earth goddess rebukes him publicly and demands sacrifice. This episode highlights the moral order of Umuofia. Even a respected man like Okonkwo is subject to spiritual and communal authority. Law is not arbitrary but anchored in reverence for the earth and ancestral harmony. Meanwhile, Ikemefuna grows increasingly integrated into the family. His companionship strengthens Mwai, who responds warmly to his stories. Okonkwo observes this closeness with suspicion, fearing softness in his son. Achebe juxtaposes two forms of strength, communal restraint and personal aggression. The week of peace symbolizes balance and reverence. Okonkwo's violence disrupts that equilibrium. Though he complies with ritual atonement, he does not internalize its spirit. This chapter marks an early sign that Okonkwo's temperament may estrange him from the very culture he seeks to embody. The community's values require moderation as well as courage. Okonkwo excels in one but falters in the other. His inflexibility begins to isolate him subtly from communal ideals. Chapter 5 The Feast of the New Yen celebrates gratitude, fertility, and renewal. Achebe lingers over preparations, the cooking, the cleaning, the display of harvest, immersing the reader in sensory richness. Wrestling contests animate the Ilo, affirming vitality and youth. Yet domestic tension intrudes. Okonkwo quarrels with Ekwefi and, in a moment of anger, fires his gun, accidentally causing alarm. The incident reveals once more his volatility. Even amid festivity, his temper threatens harmony. The chapter serves as cultural affirmation. Igbo life is depicted as abundant, ceremonious, and communal. Food, ritual, and sport reinforce collective identity. Through these details, Achebe counters reductive colonial stereotypes by presenting a civilization marked by complexity and joy. At the same time, Okonkwo's inability to inhabit this joy fully signals inner unrest. His conception of masculinity is narrow, dominated by severity. The communal world thrives on balance, he thrives on assertion. The contrast grows more pronounced. Chapter 6 The wrestling matches draw the entire village to the Ilo. Drums thunder, spectators cheer. Ekwefi watches her daughter Ezinma with protective tenderness, recalling her many lost children. Achebe shifts attention to women's experiences, revealing layers of maternal anxiety and endurance. Through Ekwefi's recollections of her elopement with Okonkwo, the narrative complicates his stern image. There was once passion and vitality in their union. The wrestling arena becomes symbolic of generational continuity, youthful strength celebrated before elders. Ezinma emerges as a spirited and perceptive child. Okonkwo's affection for her, though restrained, is evident. She embodies qualities he admires in a son. This chapter enriches the domestic dimension of the novel, counterbalancing Okonkwo's public persona with intimate detail. It reveals a society animated not only by masculine ambition but by maternal devotion and communal celebration. Chapter 7. Ikemefuna has lived with Okonkwo's family for 3 years and calls him father. Moa grows increasingly attached to him. Then the oracle decrees that the boy must be killed. Elders instruct Okonkwo not to participate, yet he joins the execution party, fearing weakness. As Ikemefuna senses danger, he runs toward Okonkwo for protection. In a decisive moment, Okonkwo strikes the fatal blow. The act is devastating. It reveals the triumph of pride over compassion. Moy senses the rupture and withdraws inwardly. The emotional cost reverberates beyond the immediate act. Achebe frames the killing as a tragic collision between communal decree and personal fear. The chapter stands as a moral turning point. Okonkwo's identity, built upon strength, now rests upon an act that undermines his humanity. Chapter 8. Okonkwo is unsettled after Ikemefuna's death. He cannot eat or sleep properly, yet he disguises his grief with brusqueness. Visiting Obirika, he defends his action as obedience to the oracle. Obirika questions whether all that the gods command is just. This conversation introduces moral reflection within Igbo society itself. Tradition is not blind, individuals may interrogate it. Okonkwo, however, rejects introspection. He suppresses doubt as weakness. Through dialogue, Achebe broadens the ethical horizon of the novel. The tragedy lies not solely in colonial disruption, but in the tension between rigidity and reflection within the culture. Okonkwo's refusal to acknowledge inner conflict isolates him further. The seeds of alienation from son, from friend, from self begin to germinate. Chapter 9. Izinma, the cherished daughter of Okonkwo and Ekwefi, falls gravely ill with fever, and the household is seized with anxiety. Ekwefi's fear is sharpened by memory. She has borne many children, most of whom died in infancy. Believed to be Ogbanj, malevolent spirits who repeatedly torment a mother by dying and returning to be reborn. Achebe uses this episode to deepen the spiritual landscape of Igbo life, where illness is never purely physical but entwined with cosmology, ritual, and ancestral influence. Ekwefi's maternal devotion becomes the emotional center of the chapter. Her vigilance through the night, her desperate attempts to cool Izinma's burning body, and her silent prayers evoke both vulnerability and resilience. Okonkwo, though outwardly stern, reveals unspoken concern. He gathers medicinal leaves and prepares remedies. Working with focused urgency, his care is practical rather than expressive. Tenderness is translated into action. Through these gestures, Achebe complicates the portrait of a man often defined by harshness. His love for Izinma runs deep, partly because she embodies intelligence and boldness he admires, traits he wishes had been granted to a son. The tension heightens when Kilo, the priestess of Agbala, arrives, possessed by the oracle. In a commanding voice not entirely her own, she declares that Agbala wishes to see Izinma. Despite Ekwefi's protests, she lifts the child onto her back and disappears into the night. The scene is charged with both sacred authority and maternal anguish. Ekwefi, torn between reverence for the oracle and fear for her daughter, follows secretly through forest paths, guided by instinct rather than obedience. Unexpectedly, Okonkwo also follows, machete in hand. He does not challenge the priestess directly, but his silent presence signifies protective resolve. Achebe renders the nocturnal journey with dramatic intensity, the darkness echoing uncertainty. Yet when Izinma is finally returned unharmed, relief washes over the household. This chapter foregrounds themes of faith, fear, and familial devotion. Igbo spirituality is portrayed not as superstition but as lived reality shaping behavior and perception. At the same time, the episode reveals emotional currents beneath Okonkwo's rigid exterior. The balance between communal belief and personal love is delicately negotiated. For a moment, harmony is restored, yet the fragility of life and of certainty remains palpable. Chapter 10. Chapter 10 presents a vivid portrayal of communal justice through the trial conducted by the Igbo. The village Ilo fills with spectators as masked figures, representing ancestral spirits, emerge from their sacred enclosure. Though the villagers know that elders inhabit the costumes, the performance is treated with solemn reverence. The boundary between living and ancestral authority is symbolically erased. Achebe demonstrates that law and umuofia is not separate from spirituality, but rooted in it. The case concerns Izewolu, who has beaten his wife and demands her return after she seeks refuge with her family. Through careful dialogue, Achebe reveals the procedural order of the trial. Both parties present testimony, witnesses speak, the Igbo deliberate. The proceedings are neither chaotic nor arbitrary. Instead, they reflect a structured system of mediation aimed at restoring balance rather than exacting vengeance. The verdict instructs Izewolu to approach his in-laws with humility and gifts, acknowledging wrongdoing. The emphasis lies on reconciliation. Violence is condemned, respect is reaffirmed. In this scene, Achebe counters colonial narratives that depict African societies as lacking formal governance. The judicial process is communal, participatory, and infused with moral seriousness. Okonkwo observes with approval. The authority of the Igbo aligns with his reverence for tradition and hierarchy. Yet the chapter subtly invites comparison between indigenous justice and the colonial court that will later supplant it. Where the Igbo seek restoration of harmony, colonial authority will impose punitive humiliation. The atmosphere of the trial is rich with symbolism. The masked figures' booming voices, the respectful silence of the crowd, and the ritualized gestures underscore the gravity of collective judgment. The community's cohesion depends upon such ceremonies. They reaffirm shared values and ancestral continuity. At this juncture, umuofia appears stable and self-regulating. Yet the very sacredness of the Igbo foreshadows future desecration. The strength of this institution will be tested by external forces unfamiliar with its spiritual meaning. Chapter 11. The narrative resumes the tension of Kilo's midnight journey with Izinma. Ekwefi's pursuit through the darkness becomes an act of defiant love. Fear stalks her steps, fear of spirits, of wild animals, of the unknown intentions of Agbola, yet maternal devotion overcomes hesitation. Achebe captures the psychological intensity of this passage, where silence and shadow heighten suspense. Kilo moves with determined purpose, her voice alternately harsh and distant as she speaks under possession. The villagers' reverence for the oracle underscores the depth of spiritual authority within Igbo society. Religion here is embodied, immediate, commanding obedience without need of written doctrine. Ekwefi's anxiety reaches its peak when Kilo enters the oracle's cave. She waits outside, uncertain whether her daughter will return. Okonkwo's unexpected appearance complicates the emotional register. He has followed, armed and vigilant, though he maintains distance from direct confrontation with the priestess. His presence suggests that beneath rigid adherence to tradition lies paternal instinct unwilling to surrender entirely to ritual decree. When Kilo eventually emerges and returns Izinma unharmed, relief tempers exhaustion. The household receives the child with gratitude. The ordeal strengthens bonds within the family, particularly between Izinma and her parents. For Okonkwo, she remains a source of pride and quiet affection. This chapter deepens thematic interplay between faith and fear. Spiritual practice sustains communal coherence, Yet it also demands surrender of personal control. Ekwafi's journey reveals the emotional cost of such surrender. Achebe portrays belief neither as naive nor as irrational. Rather, it is woven into the moral and psychological fabric of daily life. The episode also reinforces the central motif of fragility. Life hangs delicately between seen and unseen forces. Though harmony is restored by mourning, the darkness through which Ekwafi walked foreshadows broader uncertainties approaching the clan. The stability of Umuofia rests upon shared belief. Once that belief is challenged, deeper shadows may descend. Chapter 12. Obirika's daughter Zuri's ceremony offers a luminous depiction of communal celebration. The village prepares with care, measuring palm wine and assembling gifts to confirm the bride price. Achebe lingers over detail, the stacking of pots, the counting of cowries, the laughter of guests, creating a tableau of social vitality. Marriage here is not a private affair but an alliance between families, strengthening networks of reciprocity. Negotiations unfold with measured politeness. Elders verify quantities, spokesmen articulate grievances and expectations. The process reveals economic sophistication and ritual precision. Harmony depends upon adherence to custom. Deviation invites discord. For Okonkwo, participation in the ceremony restores a sense of belonging during exile. Though removed from Umuofia, he remains embedded in kinship ties. His gratitude toward his mother's kinsmen surfaces through hospitality and generosity. Yet beneath festivity lies subtle tension. The memory of Ikemefuna lingers unspoken, and rumors of white men in distant villages cast faint shadows. The ceremony thus functions as both affirmation and interlude, a moment of communal confidence before approaching transformation. Achebe underscores that Igbo society is sustained by ritual continuity. Feasts, negotiations, and shared labor bind individuals into collective identity. The richness of this chapter heightens awareness of what stands vulnerable to change. The social harmony displayed here will soon encounter disruptive forces beyond its internal logic. Chapter 13. The funeral of Ezudu erupts in dramatic tragedy. As guns are fired in salute, Okonkwo's weapon explodes accidentally, killing Ezudu's son. The shock reverberates instantly. Though unintentional, the act constitutes a serious offense against the earth goddess. The distinction between male and female crimes reflects Igbo cosmology. Deliberate violence differs from accidental harm, yet both demand purification. Justice is swift. Okonkwo must flee with his family to Mbanta for 7 years. His compound is destroyed, livestock slaughtered, property reduced to ashes. The severity underscores communal commitment to ritual cleansing. Law operates impersonally, indifferent to individual merit. Obirika questions the harshness of fate, pondering why a man's life should be undone by mischance. His reflection introduces philosophical doubt within tradition itself. Achebe allows space for moral questioning without undermining cultural coherence. For Okonkwo, the fall is devastating. Years of labor vanish in a moment. His identity, built upon achievement and status, collapses. Yet the exile is not merely punishment, it becomes catalyst for transformation. Displacement from Umuofia coincides with the early stirrings of colonial presence, linking personal tragedy with historical upheaval. The chapter marks a structural turning point. The first part of the novel closes on ruin, propelling the narrative into new terrain. Okonkwo's exile symbolizes the fragility of human accomplishment. Prosperity, honor, and security prove transient. The earth that once sustained him now demands separation. Chapter 14. In Mbanta, Okonkwo seeks refuge among his mother's kin. Achendu, his uncle, receives him with pragmatic compassion. The philosophy of maternal refuge emerges strongly. When life grows bitter, one returns to the mother, symbol of nurture and endurance. Achebe gently admonishes Okonkwo for excessive despair, reminding him that others have endured worse misfortunes. The rebuilding of life in Bantu requires humility. Okonkwo must cultivate new fields, construct fresh huts, and accept reduced status. His pride chafes under these conditions. He views exile as humiliation rather than instruction. Achebe contrasts two models of strength, Ukendu's reflective resilience and Okonkwo's rigid ambition. Adaptability becomes a quiet virtue, though Okonkwo struggles to embody it. The maternal principle represents balance and renewal, yet his identity remains tethered to masculine prestige. This chapter also marks temporal transition. 7 years stretch ahead, during which unseen changes gather beyond Banta. Exile isolates Okonkwo from developments in Umuofia, heightening dramatic irony. The world he left will not await his return unchanged. Chapter 15. Obirika visits Banta with disturbing news. In Abayan, villagers killed a white man out of suspicion, believing him an omen. Soon after, foreign soldiers arrived and annihilated the village. The tale introduces colonial violence explicitly into the narrative. The story spreads unease. Some dismiss it as exaggeration, others recognize warning. Achebe portrays the encounter as tragic misunderstanding compounded by technological disparity. The Igbo response to the stranger, shaped by oracular consultation and fear, collides fatally with imperial retribution. For Okonkwo, the news confirms his conviction that strength alone preserves dignity. Yet exile renders him powerless to act. The widening horizon of the novel now encompasses imperial intrusion, foreshadowing more direct confrontation. The destruction of Abayan stands as ominous prelude. What occurred there may soon visit other villages. Cultural self-confidence begins to tremble. Chapter 16. Missionaries arrive in Banta, preaching a singular God and condemning traditional deities. Their message attracts those unsettled by aspects of Igbo cosmology. Moi, burdened by Ikemefuna's death and troubled by the abandonment of twins, finds emotional solace in Christian hymns. The new faith offers compassion and certainty that resonate with his inner doubts. When Okonkwo learns of Moi's conversion, rage overwhelms him. He beats his son and disowns him. The generational fracture becomes irrevocable. Moi leaves to join the Christians, later adopting the name Isaac. Achebe presents conversion as psychological as well as theological. It arises from moral discomfort and longing for gentler answers. The missionary's success reveals internal tensions within Igbo society, not merely external imposition. For Okonkwo, however, the departure signifies betrayal and emasculation. His authority within the family crumbles. The personal mirrors the communal, tradition confronted by alternative belief, certainty challenged by doubt. Chapter 17. The arrival of the missionaries in Banta marks a turning point, as foreign religion begins to assert influence within the community. The elders offer them a plot in the Uval forest, expecting the sacred power of the site to annihilate the intruders. This act demonstrates both hospitality and a subtle assertion of cultural authority. Yet when the missionaries survive unscathed, the villagers are unsettled. Their expectations, rooted in tradition and fear of supernatural consequences, are challenged, creating uncertainty and opening the door to religious and social transformation. Achebe portrays the growth of the new religion carefully. Converts are drawn not only from those dissatisfied with certain customs, but also from marginalized groups, particularly the Osu, who were excluded from many aspects of Igbo social life. Christianity offers them inclusion and dignity, revealing the latent inequities in the traditional system. The missionaries' appeal therefore rests not solely on spiritual doctrine but also on social opportunity, highlighting the multifaceted nature of a cultural change. Okonkwo observes these developments with mounting frustration. The transformations he sees threaten not only tradition but his personal conception of masculinity and authority. His expectation of communal resistance and loyalty is contradicted by the quiet, incremental shift in allegiance. Achebe uses Okonkwo's perspective to illustrate the generational and ideological tensions emerging in Igbo society. Through this chapter, the narrative moves beyond domestic or village life to the broader forces of historical change. The subtle advance of the missionaries reflects the gradual but inevitable disruption that will alter the social, religious, and political fabric of Umuofia. By portraying both the appeal of the new faith and the anxiety it produces, Achebe highlights the complex, ambivalent dynamics of cultural encounter. The story of a Bain where villagers previously killed a white man and were subsequently destroyed haunts the community. Banta's cautious approach contrasts with the Bain's fatal overreaction, suggesting that adaptation, negotiation, and observation can mitigate immediate risk. Yet the chapter foreshadows the deeper conflicts and irreversible consequences to come. It sets the stage for more direct confrontation, illustrating that the collision between indigenous tradition and colonial intervention is neither simple nor predictable. In summary, Chapter 17 establishes the transformative power of religious intrusion. The missionaries' survival in the evil forest challenges the community's cosmology. The inclusion of outcasts signals internal social disruption, and Okonkwo's rising frustration underscores the personal dimension of cultural upheaval. It prepares the narrative for conflict, both ideological and violent, that will intensify in the following chapters. Chapter 18 tensions escalate as the Christian converts begin to assert themselves openly within the village. One convert unmasks an egwugu during a ceremony, an act of profound sacrilege, shattering the sacred authority of the ancestral spirits. Achebe's depiction emphasizes that the conflict is not merely spiritual but deeply social, for the egwugu embody the moral and judicial authority of Umuofia. The destruction of their ritual authority marks a direct challenge to the social cohesion of the community. In response, the egwugu retaliate by burning the church. This action is symbolic rather than indiscriminate violence. The elders exercise restraint, avoiding murder, indicating that even resistance is tempered by communal ethics. The burning reflects both the defense of tradition and the limits of force when confronting transformative cultural pressures. Achebe shows that traditional authority is not fragile but not absolute. It is contingent upon collective belief and respect. Okonkwo interprets the situation as proof of the need for decisive action. For him, violence is a legitimate expression of strength and a means to restore honor. Yet the collective response of the community is measured. The villagers hesitate to escalate conflict, reflecting fear and uncertainty in the face of the changing social order. Achebe illustrates the contrast between individual impulsiveness and communal prudence. The chapter highlights the psychological impact of religious intrusion. The missionaries' unyielding doctrine, combined with the zeal of converts, undermines the moral certainty of the Igbo. While Christianity attracts some, particularly outcasts seeking recognition, it simultaneously disrupts traditional hierarchies. The authority of age, experience, and ancestral wisdom is challenged in ways that cannot easily be reconciled. Achebe also explores the theme of miscommunication and misunderstanding. Cultural assumptions collide. The converts see their acts as righteous. The elders view them as desecration. These parallel interpretations intensify conflict. The event foreshadows the broader, irreversible confrontation between indigenous customs and colonial power, establishing the ideological and spiritual stakes that will dominate the final chapters. Chapter 18 thus serves as a narrative fulcrum. The destruction of the church signals that the old order can resist but not fully contain external influence. Okonkwo's desire for violence contrasts with the village's measured caution, highlighting the internal tension that will shape the community's response to colonial authority. The chapter bridges the spiritual disruption introduced by missionaries with the political upheaval that follows. Chapter 19, as Okonkwo's 7-year exile concludes, he prepares to return to Umuofia with the expectation of restoring his status and influence. He dreams of hosting feasts, reclaiming his titles, and regaining the respect he had earned before the accidental killing that led to his banishment. Exile has intensified his desire for recognition, shaping his perception of honor and masculinity. Achebe depicts Okonkwo's anticipation as both personal and symbolic. It represents the return of a hero to a world that may no longer mirror the one he left. Before departing, Okonkwo hosts the farewell feast for his mother's kinsmen, expressing gratitude for their support. The episode underscores the enduring importance of kinship and the maternal lineage, which provided refuge during his period of vulnerability. Okonkwu's counsel on humility and endurance, emphasizing reliance on maternal protection, forms a quiet moral counterpoint to Okonkwo's restless ambition. However, Achebe foreshadows the dissonance awaiting Okonkwo in Umuofia. Time has passed, and the social, economic, and political landscape has shifted. Colonial influence has begun to permeate even those aspects of life he believes immutable. Trade, Christian conversion, and altered power dynamics have quietly reshaped the village. Okonkwo's expectations of recognition and loyalty clash with the reality of a society gradually adapting to external pressures. The chapter highlights themes of aspiration, adaptation, and the inevitable tension between individual ambition and historical forces. While Okonkwo views exile as a temporary setback, the reader recognizes that the circumstances he returns to are irrevocably altered. The contrast between his internal determination and the external reality reinforces the tragic trajectory of the novel. Achebe also emphasizes the passage of time and the subtle, cumulative effects of colonial and cultural disruption. Okonkwo's personal restoration is inseparable from broader social change. The narrative tension between his desire for continuity and the evolving structures of Umuofia sets the stage for the climactic confrontations of the remaining chapters. Chapter 19 is thus both a moment of personal transition and a lens through which the reader sees the encroachment of historical forces. It positions Okonkwo at the intersection of past achievement and future uncertainty, preparing the narrative for the collision between individual will, communal authority, and colonial power. Chapter 20, as Lucas continues recounting his youth beside Lucy's hospital bed. The narrative deepens into the blossoming attachment between himself and Isabel. What began as a chance encounter on a dusty country road matures into deliberate pursuit. Encouraged by his brother James and buoyed by the steadfast affection of his parents, Lucas resolves to see Isabel again. He begins arranging his errands and social outings to coincide with the rhythms of the bourgeois household. Eventually, courage triumphs over hesitation. Lucas presents himself at Isabel's home under the respectable pretext of neighborly acquaintance. The meeting is modest, restrained by the conventions of the 1950s countryside, yet charged with youthful intensity. Isabel's shyness contrasts with Lucas's gentle persistence. He does not overwhelm her, rather, he courts her with patience, allowing trust to unfold gradually. Their conversations, often brief and supervised, reveal shared values, family loyalty, faith, and the dignity of labor. The bourgeois family, immigrants from Quebec City, carry their own burdens of adaptation and rebuilding after the fire that destroyed their previous farmhouse. Lucas's respect for their resilience earns cautious approval from Isabel's father. Courtship becomes structured, Sunday visits, modest drives, and evenings spent under watchful eyes. Lucas narrates these memories tenderly to Lucy, weaving romance with the quiet discipline of rural life. He speaks not only of love's excitement, but of its responsibility. For him, love is inseparable from honor. As Lucy lies motionless, Lucas's recollection grows more fervent. He speaks as though willing the past into the present, hoping that memory itself might stir her back to consciousness. The hospital room fades into the background as his voice becomes the bridge between generations. Chapter 21. Lucas's courtship of Isabel strengthens, shaped by simplicity and sincerity. Their affection matures through shared routines, church services, harvest festivals, and evenings listening to music on the radio. Isabel gradually sheds her initial timidity, revealing quiet intelligence and steadfast devotion. Yet beneath the sweetness of young love lies the weight of expectation. Lucas's father, John, envisions prosperity and expansion of the farm. He anticipates that Lucas will remain firmly rooted in agricultural life. Isabel's family, meanwhile, carries memories of displacement and hardship. Marriage is not merely romance, it is alliance, stability, and endurance. Lucas reflects on how he balanced filial duty with personal desire. He worked tirelessly beside his father, determined to prove that love would not distract him from responsibility. His diligence reassures John, who begins to see in Isabel a suitable partner for his son. Elizabeth, ever intuitive, recognizes that her son's happiness depends upon this union. When Lucas eventually proposes, the moment is neither extravagant nor theatrical. It is marked instead by earnest declaration and mutual certainty. Isabel accepts with tears and trembling joy. Their engagement brings celebration tempered by modest means. Preparations for marriage unfold within the rhythms of farm life. At Lucy's bedside, Lucas's voice trembles slightly as he recalls these milestones. He speaks as though reminding his daughter that life, even when scarred by adversity, begins in hope. He wants Lucy to remember her own inheritance of resilience and affection. Chapter 22. Marriage ushers Lucas and Isabel into adulthood. They begin their life together with determination rather than luxury. The early years are defined by labor, tending livestock, repairing fences, managing scarce finances. Yet hardship does not eclipse tenderness. Their shared struggles strengthen their bond. Lucas describes to Lucy the pride he felt in building a household from the ground up. Each purchase, each improvement to the property, symbolized progress. Isabel's quiet strength sustains him. She manages domestic life with grace, balancing frugality with warmth. Children soon follow, transforming the modest farmhouse into a place of laughter and noise. Parenthood deepens Lucas's sense of responsibility. He recalls holding his newborn daughter Lucy with awe and trembling gratitude. The memory pierces him now as he sits beside her hospital bed. He remembers promising to protect her always. Yet life does not unfold without sorrow. Financial strain, illness within the extended family, and the relentless demands of farm labor test their endurance. Lucas confesses that he sometimes struggled under the pressure of expectation, particularly from his father, whose standards remained exacting. Even so, love persists as the sustaining force. Lucas recounts these early marriage years not as idyllic but as formative. They forged resilience through shared sacrifice. He hopes that by revisiting these memories aloud, Lucy will feel anchored to the enduring love that shaped her childhood. Chapter 23. As the years pass, challenges intensify. Economic fluctuations threaten the farm's stability. Market prices shift unpredictably, and Lucas must make difficult decisions about investment and debt. The burden of leadership weighs heavily upon him. Lucas tells Lucy how pride once prevented him from admitting vulnerability, feared appearing weak before his father and community. That silence created tension within his marriage. Isabel, perceptive and compassionate, recognized his internal struggle. Through candid conversation, she encouraged him to seek balance rather than perfection. Family tragedies also leave their mark. The loss of loved ones reminds Lucas of life's fragility. Each funeral reshapes his understanding of time and legacy. He begins to see that wealth and acreage matter less than unity and memory. As he narrates these reflections, Lucas's tone grows introspective. He acknowledges mistakes, moments when stubbornness overshadowed tenderness. He speaks these truths softly, as though confession might lighten the present sorrow. Lucy's stillness forces him to confront the possibility of irreversible loss. The hospital machinery hums steadily, indifferent to his recollections, yet he continues speaking, convinced that love, articulated aloud, carries restorative power. Chapter 24. Lucas turns to the period when Lucy herself matured into adulthood. He remembers her independence, intelligence, and capacity for devotion. Watching her build her own family filled him with pride. He admired her resilience, perhaps unaware of how deeply she inherited it from him and Isabel. He recounts her first marriage, the birth of her children, and the complexities she navigated with courage. Later, when she found renewed companionship with Mark, Lucas observed her rediscovered happiness. He saw in her the same spark that once animated Isabel's shy smile. Yet he also recognizes that Lucy bore burdens silently, striving always to meet others' expectations. Lucas wonders now whether he, too, contributed to that pattern by modeling stoic endurance. His reflections are tinged with regret and humility. He speaks directly to her unconscious form, urging her to return not only for her children and husband, but for herself. He promises that if she wakes, he will share more openly, laugh more freely, and hold less tightly to pride. Chapter 25. The vigil continues. Family members gather in the hospital corridor, their whispered prayers forming a fragile circle of hope. Doctors monitor Lucy's condition cautiously, offering measured updates, but no guarantees. The swelling in her brain remains the central concern. Lucas refuses to leave her side. He recounts the entirety of his journey: childhood, courtship, marriage, fatherhood, as though stitching together a tapestry of endurance. His narrative becomes an invocation, binding past and present. He acknowledges the paradox of life, joy and suffering entwined. Through tears, he affirms that adversity did not define him, rather perseverance did. He begs Lucy to claim that same strength. The chapter closes with uncertainty suspended in quiet tension. Lucy remains unconscious, yet the room feels charged with possibility. Lucas's voice, though weary, carries unwavering love. In telling his story, he has reaffirmed the continuity of family, the inheritance of resilience passed from father to daughter.